They say funerals bring families together. But as I sat alone in the back pew, watching my parents whisper softly to my younger brother Jacob, I knew that was a lie. The chapel was quiet, the organ low, but the noise in my head was deafening. I'd already accepted that I'd never be their favorite. But nothing prepares you for the day they try to erase you altogether. Grandpa was gone. The only one in our family who ever made me feel seen. Who remembered my birthday with handwritten notes, who came to my school debate finals when no one else did. Now, he was just a framed photo near the altar, and I felt like a part of me had gone with him. The will reading was scheduled for the following week. I didn't expect much. Maybe a symbolic memento. I certainly didn't expect what would come next. The night before the reading, I received a letter. It was from Grandma. Simple, handwritten in the same looping cursive she'd used on birthday cards. Nora, your grandfather made sure everything was fair. Please don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Be there. Love, Grandma. I read it twice, then again. My heart thudded against my ribs. Fairness had never been a word that described our family. The next day, I walked into the law office in my cleanest blazer and worn heels. My parents were already seated. Jacob gave me a stiff smile. I returned a nod. The lawyer, a gray-haired man named Mr. Holloway, shuffled his papers. Thank you all for coming. This will be brief. He began reading. Grandpa had split most of his estate evenly among his children. Then came the section about the grandchildren. To my grandson Jacob and to my granddaughter Nora. I felt my breath catch. I leave equal shares of the remaining trust. There it was. Equal. The room tensed. Dad cleared his throat. Actually, if I may, Nora isn't particularly interested in these matters. We'll be accepting her portion on her behalf. Mr. Holloway paused. I'm sorry? Mom smiled gently, placing a hand on Jacob's shoulder. She's never been materialistic. But Jacob, he's building a future. A tech startup. He could do so much with that support. Jacob didn't speak. He just looked down. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Then, Grandma stood. Let's finish reading the will, she said firmly. Mr. Holloway nodded and continued. When he reached the final clause, his voice steadied. It is the explicit instruction of the late Mr. Edmund Hayes that neither portion may be transferred or redirected without full legal consent of the recipient. My father's jaw locked. Let's be reasonable. Nora's doing well. She has a career, an apartment, no debt. Jacob is still finding his path. Mom leaned in. And Nora's always been so generous. She won't mind sharing. I felt the fire rise in me. I do mind, I said. I never asked for more than what was fair. And this is finally fair. My dad narrowed his eyes. You owe us. We gave you everything, braces, tuition help, rent. If you cared about family, you'd do what's right. I felt Grandma's hand slide into mine. You don't owe them anything, she whispered. Your grandfather saw you. So do I. Silence. I stood up. I'm not giving up what Grandpa left me. Not this time. My voice didn't shake. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged. By the time I got home that night, the messages had started. First, Mom, you embarrassed us in front of the family. Was it worth it? Then Dad, hope you enjoy your blood money. And then the one that hurt the most, Jacob. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't respond. I didn't sleep. I paced my apartment, the silence ringing louder than any scream. My mind was torn between guilt and anger, between the child who always wanted to be loved and the woman who had finally drawn a line. 3 days later, I packed a small bag, turned off my phone, and drove for hours until I reached it. My grandparents' old cabin by the lake. The place Grandpa taught me to fish. The place Grandma used to sneak me cookies under the table when no one was looking. The cabin welcomed me with creaking wood and dust. It smelled like old pine and forgotten memories. I lit a fire, wrapped myself in a blanket, and for the first time in years, I cried. For Grandpa. For the little girl who had to earn every sliver of affection. For all the birthdays spent watching Jacob blow out candles on 3-tier cakes while I got a homemade card. The next morning, I wandered into the guest room. A small envelope sat tucked inside the drawer. My name was on it in Grandpa's neat, blocky handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands. Nora, if you're reading this, the will has already been read. I imagine things got messy. But you need to hear this. I saw you. Always. I saw how hard you worked. How you stood on your own when no one offered a hand. This inheritance, it's not a reward. It's recognition. You earned this every day you kept going, even when no one clapped. Your voice matters. Don't ever let them take it from you again. Love always, Grandpa. I sat on the floor for hours, the letter pressed against my chest like armor. It wasn't about the money. It never was. It was about finally being seen. When I returned to the city, I called Grandma. She answered on the first ring. Did you find the letter? She asked. Yes, I whispered. Good, she said, her voice cracking. He wanted you to know love can be quiet, but it should never be invisible. And then she told me the rest. Months before Grandpa passed, my parents had tried to get him to change the will. They said I didn't need it. That Jacob did. They tried to cut me out completely. But Grandpa had been ready. With Grandma and his lawyer, he'd added a clause. Any attempt to manipulate or redirect the terms of the will would result in forfeiture. And they'd triggered it. Not only would I get my full share, my parents had jeopardized their own. And they knew it. Grandma sighed. They're furious. But they can't undo it. And your father. He says you turned us all against him. I let out a bitter laugh. Of course. She went quiet for a moment. We're removing him as executor, she added softly. The estate will be handled by me and the firm. That's what your grandfather wanted, if things got ugly. I didn't realize I was crying again until she said, He planned for this, Nora. He planned for you. The fallout came fast. That night, there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and froze. My parents. My mother's mascara was smudged like she had been crying. My father's jaw was clenched so tightly it looked painful. You had this all planned, didn't you? Dad barked the moment I opened the door. I didn't respond. You manipulated Grandma. You turned your grandfather against us. I didn't turn anyone, I said evenly. Grandpa saw things clearly. Maybe for the first time in this family, someone did. Mom stepped forward, her voice wavering. Don't do this, Nora. Just sign it over. Jacob needs this. He's lost. You're not. No, I said, louder this time. I needed a family for 28 years, and I never got one. They stared at me, stunned. Then Dad gave a bitter laugh. Fine. I hope the money keeps you warm. Because after this, you don't have a family anymore. They walked out without another word. And for the first time, I didn't cry when they left. Because I hadn't lost a family. I had lost people who never truly saw me. The days after were quiet. No texts. No emails. Not even the usual passive-aggressive messages Mom liked to send disguised as concern. But I wasn't alone. Grandma called daily. Friends checked in. And then, just as I was about to head out one afternoon, there was another knock on the door. It was Jacob. He stood there, hood up, eyes heavy with something I hadn't seen in a long time, shame. Can we talk? He asked. I stepped aside. He didn't sit, just stood there like a guest in someone else's home. I didn't know they were going to do that, he said finally. At the will reading. I didn't ask for it. But you didn't stop it either, I replied. Calm. Clear. Factual. He flinched. I know. And I should have. I didn't know how. There was a long pause. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. He placed it on my coffee table. My name wasn't on it. It's my letter, he said. From Grandpa. I opened it carefully. Jacob, you've always been told you were special. But being special isn't the same as being ready. You've been protected from failure, from consequence. It's time to grow. Time to build something. Earn something. You can do more than coast. I know it. But you have to prove it, to yourself most of all. I looked up at Jacob. He was crying. I let them shape me into something hollow, he said. But I don't want to be that anymore. We sat in silence. Then he added quietly, "I'm going back to school. With my share. I want to study software design, maybe finance. I want to earn something for once." I didn't cry, but I did smile. "That's a good start," I said. He nodded. "I think Grandpa would be proud." For the first time, I said, "I think he would too." And then, for the first time in years, we hugged. Not out of obligation, but out of something real. 6 months passed, but it felt like a lifetime. My parents never reached out. Not once. They even stopped messaging Jacob. He told me they accused him of betraying them, of letting me corrupt him. But Jacob didn't seem broken by it. In fact, he was. Lighter. Like the burden of always needing to be perfect had finally been lifted. He sent me updates from his classes. Photos of group projects, screenshots of passing grades. He was proud, and for once, he wasn't afraid to show it. "I bombed my first coding exam," he texted one night. "But I studied harder and passed the retake." It felt good. Not easy, but real. We started a new tradition. Sibling Sundays. Once a month, no phones, no parents, just pancakes, long walks, and conversations. Sometimes we talked about the past. Other times, we just sat in silence, letting the weight of the years settle and lift, a little at a time. And then one Sunday morning, Jacob brought Grandma. "I didn't want her to spend the morning alone," he said. Grandma stepped in like she belonged, holding a plate of cinnamon rolls she'd baked herself. "I hope you're still strong enough to beat your brother at Monopoly," she joked. It was the first time in my adult life that our house felt full. Not with people, but with presence. That day, Grandma told us the rest of the story. About the night she and Grandpa drafted the clause in the will. "I didn't know if it would ever come to this," she said, pouring tea with shaky hands. "But your grandfather insisted. She deserves to be protected," he said. "She's done everything alone." Jacob looked at me, guilt flickering behind his eyes. But I just reached out and took Grandma's hand. "He saw me," I whispered. Grandma nodded. "He always did. He just didn't know how to show it." Until the end. That night, I stayed up reading Grandpa's letter again. I'd memorized every word, but it still made me cry, soft, healing tears. This wasn't just about being chosen in a will. It was about being seen in a family where I'd always been overlooked. I used part of my inheritance to do something bold. I launched a small mentorship fund for girls like me. Quiet fighters. Late bloomers. Underdogs. I called it the Whitmore Initiative after Grandpa. We started with 4 high school seniors. All brilliant. All invisible in their own families. I helped them build portfolios, prep college apps, learn to advocate for themselves. The first time one of them got accepted into a top university, she texted me in all caps, "I got in." They picked me. I cried then, too. Because someone had finally picked her. And I knew exactly how that felt. Jacob came with me to the scholarship dinner we hosted in June. He stood beside me, handed out awards, and beamed like a proud older brother. "They're going to do big things," he said. "Just like you're starting to," I replied. He grinned, and for the first time in our lives, there was no competition. Just respect. The night ended with Grandma raising a glass in front of everyone. "To Nora," she said, "for breaking a cycle that should have ended generations ago." The room clapped. I didn't shrink away from the spotlight. This time, I stood in it. 6 months later, everything had changed, and nothing had. My parents still hadn't spoken to me. Not a text. Not a passive-aggressive email from Mom about how families should stick together. Total silence. They had cut Jacob off too. Apparently, his decision to return to school and use his inheritance responsibly was proof I had poisoned him against them. He told me it hurt, but he also said it felt like breathing clean air for the first time. "I finally get to make my own mistakes," he said. "That alone is worth the distance." As for me, I had stopped waiting for apologies. Stopped waiting for recognition that would never come. Instead, I began building something of my own. I used a portion of my inheritance to start the Whitmore Initiative, a mentorship fund for young women like me, those overlooked, unheard, and underestimated. Girls who were told to be quiet while their brothers were told they were brilliant. We offered scholarships, internships, and coaching. But most importantly, we offered presents. We showed up. I named it after Grandpa, not for the money he gave me, but for the voice he gave back. The first time one of our students received a full-ride scholarship, she cried in my arms and whispered, "I didn't think someone like me ever got chosen." And I told her the truth. You don't need to be chosen. You get to choose yourself. Meanwhile, Jacob was thriving. He sent me screenshots of his grades, his project drafts, his silly memes about coding. "You're the nerd now," I teased him once. "Finally caught up to you," he grinned. We kept our sibling Sundays sacred. Pancakes, long walks, no phones, just us rewriting the story that was never written for us in the first place. Grandma became our anchor. She never missed a Sunday. She baked. She advised. And sometimes she just sat there watching us, smiling like she could finally exhale. "You too," she said once, "are what second chances look like." I don't know what the future holds for our parents. Maybe they'll reach out. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll keep blaming, keep stewing in their own reflection of what should have been. But I've made peace with not knowing. Because I didn't just inherit money. I inherited the right to be seen, to speak, to exist without apology. For so long, I thought love meant silence, shrinking to keep the peace, sacrificing space so someone else could shine. Not anymore. Now, I know what love really looks like. It's a grandmother who rewrites the will. A brother who learns to stand. A girl who finds her voice, and this time, refuses to give it back.